And welcome to another priestessing around the campfire session. And today we're joined by Rebecca Burgess, who is the mother priestess of the Temple of Cornwall. Hey, Rebecca!
Hello.
Woohoo! And Rebecca is here today to share some priestessing stories. But first, I'd love to ask, Rebecca, who are you? How do you priestess in the world?
So I'm Rebecca, and I priestess in the world by bringing the radical, wild, and authentic energies of Cornwall out across the world, out across the cosmos to whoever needs its magic the most.
Beautiful. And for you, you're a very practical priestess and you serve by doing a lot of ceremonies and hand fasting. So what's kind of your thing that you're called to do the most as a priestess?
So it's kind of split between hand fastings and oracling for people.
Mm-hmm.
They're my two most popular offerings, if you like.
Cool. And what kind of oracling do you do?
I do embodiment sessions. So I have embodied Morgan Le Fay in the past. I have been able to embody people's star ancestors, even concepts that I don't quite understand. I oracle in the way that I, the Rebecca, the ego, can leave the body just enough to allow the divine to come in and use me as its vessel for whatever it needs.
And is that something you've always done? Is that like a thing that you've slipped into quite easily through your life, or is it something you specifically learned? Or
Yeah, I think it's something looking back, I can see I've always done it in little dribs and drabs, but there was one really significant moment that led to the creation of the Temple of Cornwall, actually, where it was the first, boom, here it is. Here's how you priestess. Here's how you do it. I was like, okay, thank you. This is cool. And had to cope very quickly with that. And then it's just deepened over the years as well.
What was that experience like, that minute of knowing that I have to open a Temple of Cornwall now?
It was all the emotions at once. It was really unexpected, obviously, really, really unexpected, but really exciting and powerful and healing as well. Just the knowledge that, oh, this is what I'm here to do. That was really healing. And it's just led me on a big journey of many initiations before I actually opened up the temple. And I knew that's what I had to do. So knowing that I then had a big round of death, rebirth coming up, I was like, okay, that's not the best, but that's okay. We'll power through. We got there. We're here today.
Yay! And when you say you're the mother priestess of the Temple of Cornwall, what is the Temple of Cornwall? People who don't know anything about it, and imagine that somewhere in Cornwall there is a cavernous hall cut in a cliff that is the Temple of Cornwall. We wish.
That would be so cool. So the Temple of Cornwall is it's an online and offline temple. It roams around at the moment, finding pop-up spaces. But it is essentially a spiritual hub for all things Cornish, its magic, myths, and mysteries. It's just one big centre for people to come and gather up all that yummy Cornish energy and go back out into the world.
Beautiful. And you do pop-up temples. Can you tell me, what is a pop-up temple?
So pop-up temple is when a temple energy is created somewhere other than in its permanent space. So at the moment, its permanent space is my office. But every 6 weeks or so, I will pick everything up and take it to wherever the temple is feeling called to go. So I always think of the temple as a child growing up. So at the moment, it's in those teenage years, I'm on a gap year, I'm going traveling. So it's called to all these different sacred sites around Cornwall, the different events. And sometimes it'll just be a public ceremony that's there. Sometimes it's leading people on a pilgrimage. Sometimes it's these massive 2-day events where I get all the spiritual leaders in Cornwall together to lead a big community thing together. So it changes every 6 weeks or so. But it's always fun and interesting and fresh. Always keeps me on my toes.
And when people visit the temple, so I just want to give people a good idea of what it's like to visit the Temple of Cornwall when it's at a pop-up centre. When they visit the temple, what's happening there? Do you make the space beautiful? Do you, the particular song you have to play? What do they do? Do they come in and pray? Tell us, what's it like to visit the pop-up Temple of Cornwall?
If you ever visit a pop-up Temple of Cornwall, then we will always have a free to visit temple space alongside any workshops or ceremonies we might be having. And this is the space where you, your family, friends, whoever can come and visit. There will always be a priestess of Cornwall kind of there to guide you into the temple. They can be there to anoint you with a community-based anointing oil if you like. There's offerings that you can take out into the wild that you can give back to the earth for free. There's the sacred flame of Cornwall that sits in the middle of the altar, which you can just go sit around and meditate on your own, or if you said pray, or whatever your version of praying is. There's nobody there to kind of tell you how to worship. You can worship however you need. We've had people in the past doing like backflip yoga moves in the back of the temple because that's how they needed to worship at that time. We've had people have a cheeky little nap, and that's fine. I'm not going to begrudge that to anybody. So it's always really peaceful, very sacred, very, feel it in your like of heart and womb and yoni. It's just that connection to the earth and to the heavens. It's that bridge space, that liminal.
I remember the first time I ever went to the Goddess Temple in Glastonbury, which is probably the most well-known one in this country. I had a cheeky little nap, and that's pretty much the purpose I went there for, and it was great. And I remember they call them Melissas in the Goddess Temple in Glastonbury. They're like the people who hold the space and the people who are looking after the volunteers. And I remember I was having a cheeky little nap, and one of the Melissas came and put a rainbow blanket on me, and I was like,
oh, Melissas are the best.
Okay, cool. So I would love to ask you, Rebecca, what is the piece of Avalon that you hold in your priestessing practice?
This is a twofold question for me. In my personal practice, it's very much the oracle in connection, like being the oracle of the divine, the gods, goddesses, whoever you feel called to. And in my kind of public practice, it's very much that the piece of Avalon that connects to Cornwall. It's like, the St. Michael ley line. It's that part of the connection, the community of it all. That's the piece of Avalon that I carry in my priestess practices.
Tell us about that ley line piece connection you mentioned.
So I'm sure most people listening to this will have been to Glastonbury tour at some point or another. And
it's been a dream of theirs to go, for sure. Or it's been a dream of theirs to go.
Yes, definitely. So there's a ley line that runs through St. Michael's Tower at the top of the tour. And that connects directly to St. Michael's Mount here, just off near Land's End here in Cornwall. And it's this big energy line that connects all these sacred sites. There's a big ley line here in Cornwall. I can't remember its name, but it's a big ceremonial route that pilgrimages would have taken place on with our ancestors. And the St. Michael line runs straight through that, and it builds and builds this power, and it goes back and forth between the two lands and the two ancient energies, and it's just, you can feel the buzz. It's palpable. It's amazing.
Very cool. Awesome. And I learned that I think I knew this, but when you know something but it hasn't really registered, it's like and it hasn't quite got in your brain. For me, one of the ley lines that go through Glastonbury tour, and I'm not really a ley line person, to be honest. I'm very skeptical until I can no longer ignore the truth of things. So but I like them. There's a ley line that goes from Glastonbury tour to a little town that's just outside of my city. So
amazing.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
On what other piece? I wanted to ask you another piece about this album thing. No, it's gone. So we're around the campfire. So 4 more hands on the metaphorical campfire. And I would love to invite you to tell some stories of your time priestessing, and whether the stories of you holding this priestess role, or you really receiving something from the goddess, or sometime when something went a bit wrong, but you fixed it because you're a legend. All these stories of what it means to be a practical priestess in the world. That's what our campfire wants. So
love it.
Share some stories with us.
So I've got lots of different hand fastings stick out in my head for lots of different reasons, but the one that always makes me giggle, and I think, 14-year-old me would think this is really cool, is this. I was asked to do a hand fasting for a lovely couple last year, and the groom stems from the Carter family, which here in Cornwall was the pirate family. They were like the big shots in the pirate industry. don't really know what it was, but they were a big pirate family, and he was selling off the family land, which had belonged to the Carters previously. So this had been in his family for centuries at this point. He was selling it off a few years ago, and he was going through this like dilapidated, ruined building, and he found a pirate sword, like a cutlass sword, and he had it authenticated, and it was like a Carter pirate sword that would have gone on boats to steal and plunder and raid, and it got seen all these adventures. That's a really cool story that he was telling me. And then he was like, so me and my fiance, we want to do something like jumping the broom at the end of the ceremony. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, that's wicked. And he was like, but we want to do it with a sword. And I was like, I've never done that. That sounds wicked as well. And he was like, but the pirate sword. And I was like, that's so cool. So I got to stand there in front of all these people, wield this old pirate sword that has seen so much history and adventure, and hold it for them to jump over, like from the handfasting ceremony. So that was really cool. And that ceremony was overlooked by a herd of camels.
Really?
Yeah, it was the most unique wedding I think I've ever done, and all the weddings I do are very unique. And there were camels, pirates, yeah, it had everything that you didn't know a wedding needed. It had.
Were the camels there intentionally, or did they just accidentally be next to a field of camels?
It was on a camel farm, the wedding.
Oh.
So the camels weren't invited, but they were there watching. They were very curious.
They have camel farms in Cornwall.
I didn't know it was a thing either. But apparently we do. I presume it's just the one, but I've not checked, to be honest. Maybe that's our secret trade. It's not tin anymore. It's camels.
Camels. Have you got any more stories? Because I like that one so much.
I do. I think this is more like a personal story. And it's something that you've helped me with actually over the years. It's bringing my authenticity into my priestess practice. And that's been a really big journey. And that's, I think, my most important lesson as a priestess that I've learned so far. It's that, like, when I first started the temple, I presumed, like, oh God, to be the mother priestess, I can't be seen to be anything less than perfect and like the divine mother of the heavens, and oh, this wonderful thing. That's lovely, and I can be that every now and then, but that's not me. And I was getting burnt out really quickly with everything to do with the temple and life in general, because I was putting up this front and not just relaxing into being myself and trusting that that's enough. And over the years, with lots of, so the last couple of years, with lots of personal work and working with you last year as well, it's all really helped me to realize that, especially as priestesses, we work a lot with either weaving our own destiny or surrendering into something that we believe to be our calling or destiny. That you were literally born for this, so you don't have to change unless you want to. You know, the heavens, the gods, the cosmos, whomever made you perfect for this role exactly as you are. So kind of to surrender into that is a really big, I think my most important priestess lesson so far. I'm sure there's many more to come, but that's my most important. But there's plenty of other stories.
That one's a really interesting one, because I see so many of us who do priestessing, whether it's public priestessing and priestessing as a service for other people, or priestessing for ourselves, fall into this. I don't know why we do it. Maybe it's Mother Mary's fault. I don't know. But fall into this trap of believing we have to be like perfect saintly beings, and I'm not. I'm a hot mess. And actually, a hot mess is more useful as a priestess.
Yeah, that's very true.
Tell me another story. I love hearing your story.
Ooh, another story. Let me think. Oh, this is a really cool piece of like Cornish history that I learned while priestessing. So last year I did another really big hand fasting at a little sacred chapel called St. Cleathers. And you've got to walk like half a mile through the valley. You've got to walk through a graveyard to then get to the valley, to then get to the little sacred well chapel thing. It's really cool. And this was a massive wedding. There was going to be like 100 people there. And it was having to like carry all my priestess kit, like temple kit, down to the sacred little well. It was like sweated and a mess. But then it was all set up. It was really peaceful. And the groom was already like dressed in his like Cornish tartan and ready to just come and like say hi to me and my Melissa for the day and get settled in. and he was telling me about how there's a stone altar in the chapel. It's an unmanned chapel. You can kind of just visit any time of day that you want. And the sacred water runs underneath the altar. Like, it's been raining a lot. There's literally like a little river in the chapel. It's really beautiful. And he said that at least back in the day, people used to drink the water that came out the other side of the chapel because Saint Cleather was buried underneath the stone altar. And so they would drink the water that covered his bones. They would drink the water that like washed over his body, because apparently it would heal you. And apparently he's not there anymore, which I'm glad, because I did drink the water before I found that out. It's really interesting to think people were willy-nilly drinking saint broth to heal themselves.
Very cool, but pretty grim.
Yeah, pretty grim. Thank God for ibuprofen. Don't need to do that anymore.
Tell me another one. I love hearing the Cornwall stories.
Ooh, another one.
Cornwall handfasting stories. So awesome.
Cornwall handfasting. Ooh, my first ever handfasting. So I think this might have even been a case study for when I was learning how to be a sacred celebrant. Was for a kind of friend that I'd known for a while, and her husband were having a vow renewal handfasting. So I was like, one for free. I need to learn. Let's do this together. So they chose Tintagel Cliffs as their handfasting site. And obviously you can't hire the cliffs. Nobody would hire the cliffs. That's insane. So it was all like open to the public, and the elements as well.
Yeah.
And
just for people that don't know, Tintagel Cliffs is this beautiful, big, sea, wild cave space, and it's got the castle that King Arthur supposedly was born at. So it's fancy Cornwall stories. Do continue.
Yes. So yeah, open to the elements. Me and my assistant for the day were trying to pin down my big ivy circle that I used for ceremonies, but it kept blowing away, so we'd have to like run along the cliffs and gather it all back and put it down, and everything was finally like settled and ready. The bride and groom had appeared from the wildness of Cornwall, and then we're in the middle of doing the actual handfasting ceremony, so their left hands are bound together, and it all got a little bit chaotic in the most beautiful way, because all of a sudden all these tourists appeared out of nowhere, and it'd been empty, which for that time of year is quite surprising for Tintagel Cliffs. But up until like the peak moment, nobody had been there. Then all of a sudden it was like the whole village had appeared on the cliffs to witness this moment, and each and every single one of them came over. I was like, do you mind if we like say congratulations to the couple? Is there something we can do? And I always have like little scraps of ribbon for the actual guests to tie onto the handfasting ribbon while they're still bound with it. So I was like, yeah, like take a little piece of ribbon, go and say hi to the couple, and tie this on as your blessing. And they got like, their handfasting cord was more blessings than it was ribbon at the end of the day. It was beautiful. It was so like chock-a-block of these like random little scraps of ribbon that was just complete strangers that just loved the energy of this couple and loved how in love they were, and was tying it on. It was really beautiful.
Oh, love. Oh
no, it's magical.
So Rebecca, people want to find you on the internet. Where do they find you?
You can find everything that we do at templeofcornwall.com, and you can find me on Instagram at Temple of Cornwall.
And she is legit a very, very good oracle priestess. My Caroline gets her to come to my things and do the oracle stuff for me. Oracle's not my skill, so I outsource it to Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me around the campfire. I hope everyone enjoyed these stories of what a handfasting priestess does and has an idea of what that looks like as a priestess path. And it was wonderful to hang out with you.
It was lovely. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So welcome.